So this is part of the Sierra Club. I will give this little presentation. Sierra Club has a national. They had been in San Francisco for a century, but they moved to Oakland because of the cost of rental in San Francisco. And so that's a national, actually has some international flavor to it. Then there's a chapter. So we're part of the Loma Prieta chapter, which is located in Palo Alto, and involves this county and the one to the north, San Mateo, and the south of us, San Benito. I always ask anybody from San Benito. Someday they'll come. And then the chapter has groups, and we are the Guadalupe regional group. So this is the last presentation of the year, and this is a kind of a new thing for us. I've had people with DVDs present and whatever, but this is the first time I've had an author come with a very interesting book. It's a great trip to this. So I'll introduce to you briefly Justine Burke. She's a sustainability consultant specializing in behavior change for waste prevention and alternative transportation projects. I told you I should have done it. Clients include NASA, the EPA, universities, and manufacturers and business. So, let me introduce you to Justine. It's all yours.
Thanks, Gary. I really appreciate the opportunity to come speak to the Sierra Club. This is the 20th time I've given this talk, and the word is spreading about the Green New Deal. Has anyone heard about the Green New Deal?
Yeah.
Does anyone think we need one?
Yeah.
Yes, you're in the right room. Okay, so we all know that we need millions of green jobs created to build a sustainable future, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that, giving highlights in my book. But I also want to give you a compelling reason why we need to create millions of green jobs that could be cogent to those who don't necessarily care about climate change. And so I'm excited to share that with you as well. This is a picture of the C-17 cargo hold that a friend of mine flew down to Puerto Rico. 2 days after Hurricane Maria hit in 2017, my friend Frank, who's a cargo pilot, got a call from the Air National Guard. They asked if he would fly relief supplies down to Puerto Rico, and he said, of course. The next day, he was flying a C-17 off the mainland down through the Caribbean, and he's used to, when he flies, having positive radar control the whole way. And that's where air traffic controllers and other pilots are talking constantly in the airwaves. Once they got over to Grand Turk Island, complete radio silence. That continued to Puerto Rico. The sun was setting as he and his co-pilot flew in to the airport, and that's when you noticed flattened buildings and no lights on. They dropped their cargo, turned around, and came back to the United States. This is 100,000 pounds of food and water of humanitarian aid he delivered to Puerto Rico a few days after a hurricane, Category 5 hurricane. And I asked him, Frank, what did it feel like to deliver humanitarian aid? And he did a few flights down to various islands in the Caribbean. And he said, well, it's nice to bring diesel generators and emergency response personnel, but when you're bringing food and water, you're bringing life. It felt amazing. And so talking to Frank, who's someone I went to middle school with in Maryland, where I grew up, I got this sense that wouldn't it be cool if everyone at their job every day had that sense of vitality and purpose, that you're doing something essential, that's helping the situation, that's helping other people? Wouldn't it be cool if more people felt like that about their work? Because I'm afraid too many people don't. And so part of what emerged as I was developing this book idea, as I was outlining it and fleshing it out, that we need millions of green jobs to build a sustainable future, was also that there's this crisis in the world of work. Too many people don't have jobs that are meaningful, that gives their life purpose. I stumbled upon this term, which some of you have probably heard of, from Japan, called ikigai. And ikigai means reason for living. In the Okinawa prefecture of Japan, people have some of the longest life expectancies in the world, in part because they have ikigai, reason for living. They feel useful in their communities well into their 11th decade of life. And so they have a great diet as well, but they also feel useful for their communities. So if you take the term ikigai and you look at it through the American work lens, you have ikigai at work if you're doing work the world needs, work that you love, work you're good at, and what somebody will pay you for. And I feel that more people should have that. So as I was drilling down, doing research for this book project, I was looking into the Bureau of Labor Statistics. And you know, we've all heard the numbers lately, the unemployment numbers. They sound really good, right? 3.7% unemployment, the lowest rate in a generation. But it felt wrong. It felt like it mischaracterized the lived reality of millions of people. And when I dug into the Bureau of Labor Statistics data, I found that the U3 unemployment rate that we all hear about, the 3.7% unemployment, only measures people who actively looked for work in the last 4 weeks. It didn't count people who interviewed a few times over the last year and just never got the job. It doesn't count people who stopped even looking for work. There are 37 million people between the ages of 25 and 64 who are not even in the labor force. And when you hear 3.7% unemployment, you think, well, then what's wrong with me? So this is on top of every year 626,000 people come out of jail, are released from prison, they've served their time. If they can't find a full-time job, they can't reintegrate into society. So keep that in mind as an undercurrent while we think about all the outsourcing we know has been happening for decades, jobs being shipped overseas. Automation, which is just getting going. 4.2 million people drive for a living. Do you think all those jobs are going to be around in 10 years? Between self-driving cars, self-driving delivery vans, self-driving trucks, self-driving taxis, 4.2 million people are potentially going to be released from employment, which is fine if automation is freeing people up from dull and dangerous work. But at the same time, we want to be thinking about, well, what work do we need them doing? What work does society need to be done? Not just what busy work can we create for people. So between outsourcing, automation, and then the gig economy, everybody knows what that is. It's where you're piecing together 8 hours a week here, 12 hours a week there, 4 hours on a Saturday morning here, but with no benefits. Millions of people are living that kind of reality. And then of people who do have a job, Gallup polls interviews people, surveys tens of thousands of people every week. How do you feel about your job? Do you feel like your boss supports you? Do you agree with the mission of your organization? Do you feel supported at work? And only consistently, every year for the last 10 years, about a third of people say, yes, I feel engaged at work. So there's room for improvement. I was just about to publish my book in March when this happened, February 2019. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Senator Ed Markey announced the Green New Deal. I thought, yes, this is great. Has anyone read the Green New Deal, the 14-page resolution? Nice. It's broad brushstrokes. It's a framework. It doesn't have a lot of details. And so, of course, I called AOC's office and I got to talk to Randy Abreu, and I said, Randy, I read the 14-page resolution. There's not a lot of details in there. What's up with that? And he said, we purposely wrote the resolution to not have a lot of details. We wanted to just do the broad brushstrokes and let you all have a discussion about what you wanted it to be. We want to build a broad coalition, and if we got too detailed too early and told everyone exactly what the Green New Deal was, there wouldn't be room to build a coalition of labor and unions and people from different racial groups and socioeconomic groups. So now it's up to you all to have a discussion about what you want it to be. So I thought, fair enough. So there's a compelling reason to create a Green New Deal that creates millions of green new jobs, just to create meaningful work for people. So people feel like they're doing work that's desperately needed, that's vital, that gives their lives purpose. But we also really need these millions of green jobs to build advanced energy communities and low-carbon mobility systems, a circular economy. Does anyone know, does China still want our recyclables? No. They don't, do they? They're saying, 0.5% contamination max, or we're not going to take your recyclables, which means they just don't want them. And to be fair, China wants to be seen as an economic powerhouse, not the dumping ground for our trash, so who could blame them? But at the same time, Waste Management or Public Services is trying to send our recyclables now to Malaysia. They're rejecting it. Vietnam, they're rejecting it. Argentina is saying, well, we'll take it, but they're not set up for recycling, so it's going to end up in incinerators. What if we created recycling jobs in the Central Valley? What if we handled our waste regionally? What if we prevented waste? So many opportunities for jobs. Does anybody know what percentage of all food that we raise and grow is thrown away?
30%.
I've heard 30%, I've heard 40%. 40. It's way too much. There was just an article talking about a third of the produce grown in the Central Valley rotting in the fields. Meanwhile, one of the highest rates of food insecurities is right there in the Central Valley. So enormous opportunity to reduce food waste. And food waste isn't really mentioned in the 14-page Green New Deal resolution. So I think that as we're having this discussion about what the Green New Deal could be, we should be talking about jobs to reduce food waste, because food rotting in landfills turns into
methane,
which is a
greenhouse gas.
Exactly. And then restoring nature. We now have 147 million dead trees in California, just waiting for the next spark, waiting for the next transformer to start another enormous wildfire. We need to restore healthy waterways. We could be sequestering carbon in soils and giving farmers additional income. We could be restoring wildlife populations. There's so much important work that needs to happen. So here's one of the 36 graphics in the book. This is from a Bloomberg article last year that I just thought was fascinating. They took aggregated land use data in the continental United States and depicted it graphically so you can see what the biggest use of land is. Ranch land. Sheep and goats, horses, and then here's all the livestock feed. Here's the feed exports, so we're growing feed for cattle, which we're sending overseas. So ranch land is a big chunk of it, and then another big chunk of land use you can see on the western part, private timberland, clear cuts, federal state timberland, corporate timberland. The Harvard biologist Ian Wilson has challenged us to create a half-Earth project, to set aside half of all the land, half of all the waterways for wildlife. And he says if we can do that, we can protect 85% of species. Sounds good to me. So can we find a way to coexist on the ranch lands and the timberlands with wildlife so that they can thrive? So many opportunities for work. Okay. So in my book, The Great Pivot, I talk about 30 different projects that could create millions of jobs and use all kinds of different talents. We do need engineers, and we need business people, and we need accountants, but we also need graphic designers and marketing people and salespeople and videographers and all kinds of different talents to make this work, to make this shift happen. And of these 30 projects, 9 of them are very well aligned with the private sector, because they will pay a return on investment. 8 are well aligned with the nonprofit sector, not a big rate of return, but enough to cover the costs. Nonprofits tend to operate lean, very focused on mission. And then 13 of those 30 projects I felt really aren't going to happen unless government leads it and initiates it, finds the funding for it. Now, government may also collaborate with the private sector and nonprofit sector to make it happen, like the Bay restoration work, but I just really felt like it wasn't going to happen without government initiating it. So here are some examples of the private sector green jobs that we need. One of my friends is the president for Zero Net Energy Retrofits in Commercial Buildings. It's the president of MIT Systems. And what they do is they do zero net energy retrofits, meaning they do energy efficiency of the building, like an 82,000 square foot light manufacturing facility. And then they put in solar and electric vehicle charging and monitoring communications and controls. Derek Hansen, the president of Mint Systems, told me, Justine, the last 3 proposals I did were all 3 to 3.5 year payback. As soon as I show the numbers for these projects to the building owner and the tenant, they fight over who gets to make the investment in the building because they both want the return on investment. There are 600,000 commercial buildings in California. How many of them are zero net energy? Very few. Huge opportunity there. Solar emergency microgrids. So that's also where you'd have energy efficiency, solar, EV charging, monitoring communications and controls. So if there's a blackout, they can island, PG is rolling the blackouts through the state. They can island from the grid and still function. Every one of the 345 hospitals in California, every police station, every fire station, every K through 12 school should have a solar emergency microgrid. The schools, because they could become an emergency response center, a community shelter, a